Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's frequently asked question is about the missed mandatory fasts. The question is, what should I do if I have not been able to make the Ramadan fast of last year and the Ramadan of this year has already reached? What should I do? Okay, so firstly, I have to make it clear that there is a report in Al-Bukhari and Muslim both, narrated by Abu Salama, that I heard Aisha radiallahu anha say, I would owe fasts from the previous Ramadan and I would not be able to make them up except in Sha'ban, right? Now, Al-Hafiz rahimullah said that this can be understood from her keenness to fast them in Sha'ban, that it is not permissible to delay making up the fast until the next Ramadan begins. Okay, so even though it's better to make up the missed fasts right after the Ramadan of that year ends, right after that. However, if somebody has not been able to do so and they've reached Sha'ban, the month before Ramadan of the next year, then in Sha'ban they should make up the previous year missed fasts. However, even if Sha'ban has slipped from their hands and they have not been able to, for whatever reason, not been able to keep or, make up the previous year's missed Ramadan fast, and this Ramadan has already reached, then there are two scenarios. One of these situations would be applicable. Either the reason for the delay in making up the previous year missed fast was due to some reason, like sickness, a prolonged sickness, and then Ramadan of the next year also began. Okay, now here, there's no sin. So later on, after in this Ramadan, you can just make up those missed fasts. That's it. However, what if the reason for the delay for making up the previous year missed fast was without an excuse? Okay, what if it's without an excuse? And the entire year passed you by, and now this is next year's Ramadan. So what to do now? The scholars are unanimous on one matter related to this situation and have difference of opinion in another matter related to this situation. The scholars are unanimously agreed that if a person fails to make up the mandatory fast of last year before this Ramadan, the Ramadan of this year begins, without an excuse, if they fail to do so, that it would be a sin. They are also agreed upon the fact that this person must make up those fasts of previous year, even if after this year's Ramadan. Now, what is the difference of opinion, however? The difference of opinion is whether, along with making up the fasts of last year, after this year's Ramadan, should that person also feed one poor person for each day or not? Now, there's a difference of opinion. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimullah was of the view that such a person does not have to feed a poor person as well as making up the fast. And he said because in the 185th ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention anything about feeding a poor person for the one who was not able to fast because of illness or journey, but rather to only make up those missed fasts, right? And this view was also favored by Imam al-Bukhari rahimullah, by the way. He said in his Sahih, as An-Nahai Ibrahim rahimullah said, if a person neglects to make up missed fast until the next Ramadan begins, he should fast the missed fasts of both previous Ramadan and this Ramadan, but does not have to feed any poor person, right? And this is what the first opinion is. However, the majority opinion, now Imam Malik rahimullah, Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimullah, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimullah, they are of the view, the second view, that such a person must not only make up the previous year's missed fasts, but also for each day feed a poor person, right? And their evidence is based upon the reports of some of the Sahaba like Abu Huraira radiallahu anh, as well as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh. Okay. The second opinion is the majority opinion based upon some of the statements of some of the Sahaba. However, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimullah specifically then mentions that even though the second opinion does hold that besides making up the previous year's missed fast after this year's Ramadan, if you have not been able to make it before this year's Ramadan, you should also feed a poor person for each day. However, it is not mandatory. It's not wajib. It is mustahab. It's recommended. It's recommended. Because what was reported from Ibn Abbas as well as Abu Huraira radiallahu anhuma can be interpreted to refer to what is mustahab, not mandatory. And this is the correct view. So you don't have to do anything else as mandatory, but to make up the fast of previous year after this year's Ramadan, if you were not able to make up the previous year's missed fast before this year's missed fast. But to be on the safe side, as a concession for, missing on making up the previous year's missed fast, the outstanding fast, as a recommendation, it is encouraged as a compensation to also feed one poor person for each day, right? Now let me recap. If any one of you have mandatory fasts still remaining from past, then the priority is to make them up before Ramadan begins, but you should not fast a couple of days before Ramadan, the last couple of days of Sha'ban. However, if Ramadan begins and you still have mandatory fasts remaining from the last year, then you can make them up after Eid al-Fitr. Okay, after Eid al-Fitr. So how will you go about it? First, make up the mandatory fast left from previous years. Then make up the mandatory fast left from this year, if any. And then you may, not must, but may feed one poor person for each day of missed mandatory fast from previous years, as recommended, not mandatory, recommended to be on the safe side. Not of this year, okay? It is not only for the outstanding fasts, but the outstanding fast that you were not able to make up before the next Ramadan. So even when you are, as a recommendation, according to the second view, the majority view, if you are even feeding one poor person for one missed fast of the previous year that you were not able to make up before this Ramadan, then make sure that you are only restricting it to the previous year's outstanding fast, and it does not include this year's Ramadan missed fast, okay? Because you still have time for next year to make up any missed fast of this Ramadan before the next year's Ramadan. Let me repeat in case you're confused. If you can make up the outstanding fast of last year before this year's Ramadan, alhamdulillah, that's good. If you're not able to make it throughout the year, but only in Sha'ban, okay, that's also proven in the report from Aisha radiallahu anha. But if this Ramadan has reached, or there are only 2 days left for this Ramadan, then you cannot make up you cannot fast in these last couple of days. Then, because you still have outstanding fast of last year and this Ramadan has reached, then after this Ramadan, while you're making up last year's or past outstanding fast, with that, for each day, feed one poor person. I'll tell you how to do that, but that's according to some of the Sahaba, and this is the second view, the majority view, and Allah knows best. But if there are any missed fast of this Ramadan, this year's, You don't have to feed anyone because you still have time to make it up before next year's Ramadan. Okay? But now the question is, what is this fidya? This fidya is feeding one person, one poor person, for that one outstanding fast of previous year that you were not able to make up before this year, previous year or years that you were not able to make up before this Ramadan, right? It is permissible for you to offer food before making up the fast, the outstanding fast, after this year's Ramadan, or at the same time when you are fasting, making up the previous year's fast, or after you have fasted. So basically, when this Ramadan ends, after Eid al-Fitr, when you are trying to make up the outstanding fast of previous years, then either during, before, or after making up those outstanding fasts of previous years, not this year, then you can also feed one poor person for each of those days to be on the safe side. Now, you also have the choice between whether you want to give each poor person half isa, approximately 1.5 kilograms of any staple food like rice, or making up food, inviting the poor to eat according to how many days you had that many poor people. So either you can approximately 1.5 kilograms of any staple food of that region that you're at, either for each day you pour one poor person that much, or you can make that much food or get it made and invite that many poor people as that many fast remaining, minimum, that many people, and feed them. This fidya is just to be on the safe side, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.